Okay. Where's it gonna save to though?
It's going. You might want to pause the recording again because we still recording now.
All right. Good evening. Thank you for being here tonight. We are going to jump right in. This should be a pretty small group tonight because this is a very specific topic that we're covering, which is responding to the 10-day notice of award that was recently issued by the Illinois Department of Agriculture for craft grower and infuser applicants. So just in case folks who are going to be viewing this now or later are new to the Trep School programming, I am S.L. Owens. I'm an attorney and a legal educator. I focus my work on business and regulatory law. I am also a survivor, as you could call it, of the war on drugs. I grew up in a disproportionately impacted area on the west side of Chicago called the Austin neighborhood. And I currently still live in a disproportionately impacted area in Chicago. Two quick notices about tonight's workshop. First, this webinar is not legal advice. This webinar is a legal education to help participants self-advocate. Please retain an attorney for legal advice. The content in this webinar reflects the law at the time of recording because Illinois cannabis law, as many of us are learning over the last year, is a very evolving area of law and is subject to regular changes that are occurring in real time through the legislator, the administrative offices and agencies, as well as through court processes and litigation. So let's get started here. Requesting an extension. Tonight we're going to cover the extension process first, because I think that that's probably the most ambiguous part of the law right now for folks who are seeking to do an extension. Let's start with what the current legal standard is. So currently, there is no legal standard outlined within the CRTA or the implementing regulations for what you need to do to meet the standard to request an extension and be granted an extension. In addition, the closest guidance that we could look at for an example only, of course, is the dispensary sections of the CRTA, which points to what they call a hardship as an example, but without giving any definition. So what this means is that the Illinois Department of Agriculture does not have at the moment any specific guidance or law that we can look at to tell us what the agency is looking at to determine who should qualify for an extension, how to process extensions, and what the criteria should be for giving an extension, how long an extension should be. So I think that's important to know, because that means that things are likely going to be changing, and it likely means that the agency will be given that guidance at a later date, because I'm sure everyone wants to know the answer to that. What we do have is these general standards under the law. So for craft growers, the only thing that the law says right now is the applicant shall pay a prorated fee of $40,000 prior to receiving a license. For infuser, the law currently just generally says you pay a fee of $5,000 prior to receiving a license. But there's nothing in here about what to do if you would like to request an extension beyond the notice of award stating that you can request an extension. And so I did give a toolkit. If you look in that toolkit, click the link in the chat box, you'll see a generic version of the notice of award for craft grower, and you'll see a notice of award for the infuser. And so take a look at that, because you'll get a chance to see on there, especially if you're here just for learning and you're not actually an applicant right now, or you didn't receive a notice of award, you'll see in there that they basically ask you to submit a fee, and they ask you to submit a certification, and they say, if you're not doing that, then you can tell us that you no longer want it, or you can tell us that you would like to request an extension. They don't really go into much detail about what the standard that will apply will be. Hold on a second, let me just double check this link for you to make sure you can get the toolkit. Thank you. Let me pull that toolkit up because it'll be helpful to have. You should see the link here. Let me know if you were able to see the link now. I just dropped it in the Dropbox again. Okay, awesome. All right, thank you for letting me know. All right. So yeah, so moving on. So just a recap of what I just covered, which is if you're seeking an extension right now from the IDOA because you received a notice of award for craft grower or an infuser application, there is no legal standard currently in the Cannabis Regulation and Tax Act, the CRTA, or the implementing regulations that are put forth through the agency directly, the IDOA. The closest guidance that we see within the CRTA, which is only to be used as an example, that's what an attorney would do. We would see if there's anything similar to the situation in the law, not because it'll apply, but it might give us an indication of where the law might be headed. That example is found in the dispensary sections of the CRTA, which points to a hardship as an example of what will qualify to receive an extension from the dispensary side of the licensing. But even there's no definition that defines what a hardship would be. What I did include in the toolkit is the relevant sections of the law for craft grower and for infuser, which says just generally the legal standard for these licenses after you receive an award is you just pay a fee, right? That's what it says in both the infuser part of the law. It says that in the craft grower part of the law, and in the notice of award, which I included copies of in the toolkit as well. It says you pay the fee and you submit your certification. Those are the only two requirements that are in the notice of award. In addition, the notice of award, if you take a look at it, and both of them are very similar, it says you can say that you don't want the license. And then the other option is you can say that you would like to request an extension, but it does not give any criteria for what would qualify you for an extension and what the process is for the extension, how long the extension will be granted for. So that's an indication that maybe the agency has not put forth any guidance on that yet, and they may still be deciding what that will be. But that's something to keep in mind as you continue in this process. So in light of that, what strategic approaches would you take? What kind of approaches would you take to request an extension, given that there's a lot of ambiguity and lack of clarity in the law around extensions right now? Well, number one, the first thing I think everyone should consider doing is emailing the IDOA and asking them directly what criteria qualifies an applicant for an extension. This will be helpful to you even if they don't respond. And, because it'll at least have it on the record that you have been trying to get the information that you need to continue fairly through this process. They may very well end up issuing some guidance on this sometime soon because they're probably getting flooded with tons of questions about this right now, especially given the 10-day deadline. Number 2, follow IDOA's Notice of Award instructions. So the instructions that they give are very short and concise, and I suggest doing exactly that, which is emailing the IDOA to confirm that, to inform them that you are requesting an extension via email pursuant to the Notice of Award. Notice this is a very short, sweet, and concise request, and it follows the directions in the NOA to a T. It doesn't add anything. I'm not adding a reason why I'm requesting an extension because the Notice of Award does not instruct you to give them a reason. It does not ask you to give a reason. So at this point, I think it will probably be best to just follow the directions that they give you in the NOA and simply tell them that you are requesting an extension and let them respond to you and tell you what the next steps in the process will be, or what the legal standard is, or what they would like you to do next. I think that's the safest route here, would be to just really follow their specific direct instructions. Next strategy, I would get to work. I would start doing whatever I needed to do so that I could accept my license, whether that's raise the money, apply for financing, find a location. I would do whatever it is that I need to do. I would get started on it while I wait to hear back from the IDOA. All right, next. If you do not need an extension, congratulations. That's awesome. That's amazing. Very happy for you. Now I'm going to cover for you how I would go about submitting a reply in the 10-day period. So let's first cover the legal standard, because I think it's important to always understand the legal context of what you're doing in these agencies and understanding what the legal processes are that are covering your actions. Currently, there is a general legal standard outlined within the Cannabis Regulation and Tax Act, the CRTA, implementing regulations to accept the license. The NOA outlines a legal process for accepting the license as well, which again, refer to the toolkit if you are here because you're here just to learn and you don't actually have a notice of award in hand. You can use the one in the toolkit to follow along and get yourself educated on the process. And I'm just repeating the same law here. It's this general. The applicant shall pay a fee to receive the license. So that's the context for the legal standard here. What are the approaches to requesting this, to accepting? Prepare your check. All right, prepare your check for the license fee. So here you need to follow the instructions on the NOA for mailing your check and use a secure and premium delivery service and require a receipt of delivery. For the Craft Grow, that license fee is $40,000. For the Infuser, that's $5,000. Either way, that's a ton of money that you want to make sure gets to the agency. And they are requesting that this is sent by mail. And we know that there has been a ton of fraud in the mail system lately. So you want to play this the safest that you can by investing in a very secure and premium delivery service and requiring that that service provide a receipt of delivery to you. In addition, again, keep following the IDOA's Notice of Award instructions. In there, the agency tells you, along with your license fee, to mail your certified statement, which is attached in the notice of award with the license fee according to their instructions. And they tell you exactly where to mail it to. So those are the instructions you want to follow to a T. My additional suggestion of a strategy, especially after what we've seen over the last year during the deficiency notice process, where folks have been saying that they've sent things to the agency only to find out that they never arrived, or that the agency is saying they don't have them. So in addition to the receipt of delivery, I would also scan or photograph a copy of my entire package for my records. And that's just to, you know, belts and suspenders, to have as much of a track record of you complying with the agency's instructions in the notice of award. Obviously, you want to keep that in a safe place, particularly if your check has, you know, personal information on it, things like that. But I would have that somewhere safe and within my records, just in case. And then again, get to work. Do what you need to do to launch, raise more money, apply for financing, secure your materials, brand yourself. We're rooting for you. If you are ready to get started, we are all rooting for you because we know this has been a long process. And then I am going to end by briefly covering some of the unresolved legal issues that may impact you as someone who is holding a notice of award. If you were at the workshop last night, you saw this, but I am going to just recap it one more time because it's been a lot of information coming out in the last week. So I just want to make sure we're all staying on the same page with our information. Here's some things that remain unresolved by the state for the IDOA. First, the meaning of top scoring is unclear. It's unclear what it meant to be a top scorer to receive an NOA in this first round. The timeline is not set for the deficiency notices and notice of awards for the remaining applicant pool through December 2021. IDOA announced that they will be issuing additional deficiency notices and additional notices of awards by the end of this year, but they have not said what the timeline will be for those. The scoring eligibility standard for the remaining applicant pool is also unclear. It's unclear what score you would need to qualify for an NOA in this next round of issuance. And lastly, there is still the lingering possibility of legal challenges in court, considering there's so much ambiguity. Whenever there's a lack of clarity in an agency process, it begins to, that agency begins to open itself up to some scrutiny from the judicial branch around whether they are following a fair process. So those are some things to keep in mind that could create some hiccups this year for everyone, including those who are holding a notice of award. So I am going to take a 3-minute intermission and get a refreshment, and I'll come back and I'll answer questions to the extent that you have any. All right. So before I jump into the Q&A here, I do want to go ahead and let you all know that the next workshop that we are planning over here at the Trep School is how to apply for the social equity applicant loan, which probably will be helpful to a ton of folks because it's a pretty extensive application process. So be on the lookout for that date, because that could be a very helpful workshop for getting through the loan process. And if you aren't applying for a loan right now because you're just in the early processes of learning so that you can be prepared for when eventually, probably not anytime soon, but eventually the agencies open up the application process for new applicants, which hopefully we'll see sometime next year, you'll have a head start by being so educated on all of these things now. Okay, so we have a question in that says, congratulations once again, thank you. I was speaking to vendors and they are saying that the shortages right now will affect a lot of product lines. Exactly. Part of my experience prior to joining the cannabis industry was in the franchise distribution and supply chain industry. So I'm very familiar with how there's a lot going on that side, on the supply chain side of things, affecting every industry, including the impacts of COVID-19. So that's part of why my very strong suggestion is, if you are going to be requesting an extension, to not state the reasons why you're requesting an extension right now, because that's not what the NOA is asking you to do. The NOA is simply saying, tell us that you would like to request an extension. And I would do that first if I were in the extension category. And so, just, these are things to keep in mind, like what kind of supply chain issues are going on right now and how that might impact your ability to launch. Now I'm going to type this in here so that we can have these answers over here in-house at Trep. All right. I know we have a small group, so I'm just gonna chill here and let a little bit more time pass and take some questions as they come in, as they trickle in. This is such a specific topic, which we purposely put together so that folks can get some really intentional, specific strategies for being in this 10-day period, if you are in this 10-day period. And that's not a large group of people. So we know, the question is, do we know if all 40 licenses were awarded? So we know that 40, what was the stat? Give me a second to look up the statistic. Because I think it was only 32 for infusers, but let me just double check those numbers. Okay, so we know that there were 40 graph grower notice of awards issued, 32 out of 40, so 40 out of 40 craft grower NOAs went out, 32 out of 40 infuser NOAs went out, and 141 transporter NOAs went out. So they did not issue the entire 40. And I am going to type that answer into the box so that we can have a record. So there's no clarity yet on when and if those remaining 8 out of 40 infuser NOAs will come. And I'm not in a rush here, so I'm just gonna hang around a little bit and see if any more questions trickle in before we all get out of here for the evening. I did upload the update the presentation in the Dropbox. If you want to re-download the updated version where I just corrected a typo that's important to correct on the slide covering the legal standard for accepting the license. If you are just joining us, we are, as expected, a small group tonight because of how very specific this topic is in the audience who most needs this topic right now. So we are already done with the lecture. The materials can be found, the toolkit can be found, including a copy of the PowerPoint in the Dropbox. We are recording this session as usual, so it will be uploaded to the website where folks can watch it if you missed it. And right now, I'm just sticking around and answering some questions, which you can submit in the Q&A box. So we went over some strategies tonight. All right, awesome. Good to see you here. Yes, please watch the playback because I give some strategies, and one of them that I give that I think I'll point out now to folks who just joined, that I think is probably the most important strategy that I gave tonight, is for folks who think that they would like to apply for an extension. If you think that you are going to apply for an extension, please note that there is currently no legal standard in the CRTA or in the implementing regulations defining or explaining what qualifies one for an extension after they get a notice of award. So what that means is that the agency doesn't really have any standards set forth right now. So my suggestion, given that context, is to follow the directions to a T that they have in a notice of award, which simply says to email them to request an extension. They don't ask you to tell them why you're requesting an extension. They don't ask you to get into any story or details about why you are requesting an extension. Because of that, I highly recommend that you do not get into all the tea around why you are requesting an extension, and instead you just simply do what they told you to do and email them and ask them for an extension, tell them that you're trying to request an extension, and then wait for them to respond back to you to tell you why, how you can qualify for an extension, or what the next steps for an extension is, or what the legal standard is. So that's the number one strategy that I am giving out tonight. The second best strategy that I went over, which I still recommend that you go back and watch the playback, but the second strategy is to right away, if you haven't, email the department and ask them what is the criteria, legal standard for qualifying for an extension. You may not get an answer back from them because they may not know this answer yet. It's unclear whether they have made a standard for this yet or a process for this yet. But the reason it's important to do this is two reasons. One, you can have a record of you trying to fairly navigate this process. And number two, after they get flooded with so many of these questions, they may go ahead and update their website and provide some guidance for this. So I think those are the most important things that I covered in tonight's webinar. And in the toolkit, I provide copies, generic versions of the NOA for the infuser and craft grower, just in case you did not get an NOA right now, so that you can see for yourself what it looks like. If you're here because you are probably still in the running for the next round, it'll just be helpful to see what the NOA looks like. If you're here because you're getting educated in the industry, because you may apply later when they eventually hopefully open up the applications to new people, be helpful to just take a look and understand how these processes work. I also provide copies of the relevant law that I cover in the presentation tonight. So when you watch the playback, you can pull up the law and it's highlighted for you and the relevant provisions. And I also provide a copy of the PowerPoint. All right, you're welcome. I am always happy to see you all getting yourself educated as much as possible on every aspect of this industry across agencies, because information is power. And the more you understand how both of the agencies who are handing out licenses work, the better. So if you have any questions, go ahead and drop them in the Q&A. I'm going to stick around a little bit more to see if any more questions come in. The other information I shared, if you recently joined, was that the next webinar that we're planning at the Trep school is on the lending process, how to apply for one of the social equity loans, because it's a very involved and detailed process. So be on the lookout for an email on that one. All right, I'm going to do a last call for questions in the Q&A box. If I don't receive any more questions by 6:45, I'm going to end this webinar, let you all take a look at the materials, rewatch the video, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Have a good evening. You're welcome. Thanks for joining us. All right, beautiful people. Well, it's 6:45. We have covered everything. I appreciate you being here this evening, and I'm wishing you all the best of luck as you continue to get educated and go through this process. Have a lovely, lovely, lovely night, and I will see you next time. Thanks. See you later. Have a good night.